around the sort of phrases you hear associated with that. I think we heard some today. One-stop shopping, single version of the truth, a single book of business. It has this sort of neat way of, okay, we're going to put everything in one place, and then our problems will be solved. What we've seen though, and that can be a perfectly valid strategy, what we've seen though is that if you talk about particularly resource forecasting and project planning, the number of vendors that support that combined solution, very thin on the ground. Obviously Planisware is sort of the elephant in the room. I think there are, PlanView offers some solution in this space, but the pharma we speak to, it's often Planisware that they've invested heavily into this combined solution. So that we've got highly concentrated, vendor pool. Very few vendors sort of support that approach. And from that, and maybe this is controversial, my perception is capabilities in this space have stagnated. So I think people who are doing resource forecasting now are using probably the same sort of approaches, parametric-based algorithms, same way of designing those formulae that they were using 10, 15 years ago. Very put in, time and effort. It's hard to think of a path out of that without causing enormous business disruption. And at the same time, these companies are saying, well, we see AI coming in, or these other solutions, or we see how maybe systems that were split apart and Gantt chart solutions, project planning, dedicated solutions are much better than the capability we're currently using. If you look at relatively, they have much better Gantt reporting solutions, much more advanced, and they seem to be progressing much more quickly. Whereas what we're stuck with is pretty much what we had 10 years ago. So I would say they're stagnating. I see some nods in the room. Does anyone sort of disagree with that or feel that things have moved forward? Anyone kind of feel that things are moving more quickly than that? I'm happy to kind of see, but that's my perception, is that we're really pretty stagnated in that space. But certainly from what we're hearing from customers, many of those are coming in and saying, where can we go from here? What other opportunities do you offer? And it's not that they're deliberately dragging their feet or anything, it's just that if there's a lot of competition, other companies come in and offer new approaches. It sort of drives innovation. If you've got a small number of vendors, it's very hard for them to spontaneously sort of innovate and provide different solutions. Relatively quickly, you're sort of only having to work with one thing and get that right. And there's also some good potentials for what you might call closed loop. So if you're doing your planning there and the resource forecasting together, everything's connected. Hopefully that will be much faster to generate these outputs when you're doing that. It's much more dynamic connection. But some of the negatives are, it's hard to optimize for all-finished features. That addresses a lot of these concerns. We're not building a product. This isn't like a marketing exercise. We're not building a specific product that we're going to market. It's a set of approaches and capabilities that we feel could be implemented in any medium and large pharma, using whatever infrastructure they have, just using the patterns that we're establishing. Carlos is working in the Azure platform with sort of a minimally viable product, Power Automate type capabilities. I'm working in an AWS context to see what we can do with something that can scale. But the overall sort of pattern here is things you'll have. I'll just call out a few things here. The blue is the stuff that needs to just have an empty text box and you write the code yourself. And you use a standard language like Python to do that. You just have an empty text box and you write the code yourself. And you use a standard language like Python to do that. And that's where the agentic AI comes in, being able to kind of control those approaches. So highlights, I think I kind of went through here. So I think I sort of cover those in that description. The way I like to design things, and I think it can be helpful just for people to, because I've sort of waved my hands a bit, talked about some technology stuff, just to get a sense of what that would look like. And although the UI is only a tiny fraction of this, it can help sort of drive some of the thinking about how this model, how this capability would look and work to sort of the end user. And I appreciate it's probably not easy to see it from the room. I've got a sort of a working version of it, if anyone's interested in see. It's very much a work in progress though. But the concept is, you've got a simple UI, you come in here, you're actually looking at some forecasts that have been generated. You've got a top bar of filters to say, okay, what forecast are we looking at? What particular scenario do we want to explore? Which particular therapeutic area within that? And then sort of giving you some graphical outputs that represent that sort of demand. You can quickly toggle it away.
I have a question. So, well, probably really hard for you to give a precise answer, but on this idea of monolithic versus distributed, has there been any assessment on like total cost of ownership associated with that? Because we've had this long-standing idea that an all-in-one solution and then enhance it over time is the right thing because total cost of ownership is lower. You're advocating maybe there's a better way or a different way that gives you flexibility, and all that makes sense. But like, what's the cost implications?
It's a great question, and I think that's. I haven't sort of done any assessments in that space, but it is something you can calculate. You can estimate that for your existing implementation. You talk about the respect of the licensing costs, those sorts of things. I would also definitely include time that people are expending in that space. For these solutions, you can test this in advance. You can model out the cost. You can assess it. So you can definitely do a comparison. I would think you can't. The thing that you would miss in that is, I think, the opportunity cost you've got now with the solution. And I would say that's much more of a significant contribution. The fact that you're unable to change that.
So Peter, just to expand on that, so I'm not sure who asked the question, but we have built a 5-year TCO, total cost of ownership calculator, buy versus build. The traditional model was you always buy, it's cheaper, but with...
Thank you very much.